The office of the mayor was the only room in New Cody that smelled of something other than dust and rot. It smelled of expensive tobacco and the sharp, metallic tang of a weapon recently cleaned. Eric Sawyer stood by the window, his gaze fixed on the town he had methodically dismantled and rebuilt in his own image. Behind him, the door creaked open, and the heavy, uneven footsteps of Miller echoed against the floorboards. Miller was not alone. The two guards who had accompanied him to Elias's home followed closely, their faces etched with a visible, trembling anxiety. "You wanted to see me?" Miller said as his voice cracked, knowing that Sawyer was going to be less than thrilled to hear about his failed mission. "I do," Sawyer said calmly, still gazing out the window. "Which building is Elias working on first?" Miller swallowed hard and took a deep breath, his voice wavering as he attempted to explain the circumstances of their failure to bring in the man who had become a symbol of quiet resistance. "Elias isn't like the rebels we've dealt with before. Most of them want to repel borders. Elias doesn't seem to care about New Cody. He just wants to be left alone, and I think we should leave him be." "Why?" Sawyer asked. Miller replied with an excuse that showed his feeling of intimidation. "He's far enough away not to be a problem, and he knows if he comes here he'll have to deal with you, and he doesn't appear to want any part of that." Sawyer remained unnervingly calm, his back still turned to the room as he listened to Miller's frantic explanation, which was reinforced by the two men who had stood beside him during the confrontation at the edge of town. "Is that what the two of you think?" Sawyer asked. Miller looked at the two men behind him as they nodded their heads in agreement, afraid to voice their opinion. The air in the room grew heavy as Sawyer finally moved, walking over to a rustic credenza near the window. He didn't raise his voice or offer a word of reprimand. Instead, he opened a drawer, pulled out a heavy pistol, and turned with a fluid, terrifying grace. 2 shots rang out, the sound deafening in the confined space of the office. Miller squeezed his eyes shut, standing in absolute fear as he waited for the heat of the lead and for his body to simply shut down under the impact. But the pain never came. Instead, he heard the heavy, wet thud of 2 bodies hitting the floor behind him. When Miller finally opened his eyes, he saw his companions slumped in a heap of wool and blood. Sawyer lowered the gun, his expression as placid as a lake before a storm, and calmly explained to a shivering Miller that he would not accept failure again. "I want Elias working and under control," Sawyer said, his voice a low, dangerous silk. Miller, his heart hammering against his ribs like a trapped bird, very cautiously asked if he might pose a question as he watched Sawyer return the pistol to its drawer and take a seat at his desk. Sawyer allowed it, a small gesture of mercy that felt more like a stay of execution. Miller swallowed hard again and asked if there was a problem with simply bringing in men from one of the nearby settlements to complete the building repairs. It was a valid question, one that Sawyer silently agreed with in principle. Yet his response was layered with a complexity that only added to Miller's confusion. Sawyer leaned forward, his eyes narrowing. "The longer Elias is allowed to defy us, the more people around here will think they can defy us as well. Rumors are already starting to spread that we are afraid of him. I will not allow that rumor to be the reason we can't keep New Cody under control." Miller started to understand, but didn't know why Sawyer didn't just order his death. "Killing Elias will turn the townspeople against us, and eliminating them may seem easy, but it is not what we need right now. They look at Elias like their leader and savior. There can only be one man in charge here in New Cody," Sawyer declared, his voice rising until he was shouting at the man across from him. "Bring me Elias, alive. I want to see that son of a bitch paraded down the street for all to see." Miller, desperate to escape the room and the stench of his dead comrades, quickly replied, "Yes, sir," and fled the office into the cool sanctuary of the hallway. As Miller vanished, Sawyer's focus shifted instantly. He stepped out of the office to meet with Ella, who had been waiting patiently for him, likely listening to the echoes of the gunfire. When he looked at her, he was pleased to see her as stunning as ever. Her long brown hair was styled with a precision that seemed impossible in such a desolate place, and her makeup was applied with a perfection that masked the exhaustion of her soul. Ella was visibly surprised by the summons, as her regular appointment with the mayor wasn't for another week, but she arrived on time and prepared for whatever role he required her to play. However, Sawyer's interest today was not in her beauty, but in the logistics of his expanding reach. He explained to her that he was bringing a new group of youth to New Cody and that he needed her to handle the intake, to bring the new girls along and ensure they understood the rules of their new lives in town. "Where are they coming from?" Ella asked, her voice steady but her eyes searching his. Sawyer's response was a name that made the blood drain from her face. New Bismarck. Ella immediately questioned why he would choose a settlement at such a lengthy distance. Sawyer's eyes didn't leave hers as he explained his rationale. "I want some young people here that don't know the area but can handle the work that the old people around here can't. I also want people who are already broken in and know the rules, my rules." While Ella didn't push him further with words, the look of profound concern on her face was too obvious for a man like Sawyer to ignore. He took her hand, watching her intently, as they stopped in the lobby. "I know it's near your hometown," he said, his voice dropping to a predatory whisper. "Is there anything you want to tell me?" Ella's mask slipped for only a fraction of a second before she snapped it back into place. "No," she replied quickly. "I'll take the girls as soon as they arrive. Is there anything else?" "You seem a bit nervous. Are you sure everything's okay?" Sawyer asked with suspicious concern. "Of course," Ella replied quickly, trying hard to conceal her true feelings. Sawyer dismissed her and watched her leave, his mind torn between the lingering affection he felt as he stared at her backside and the deep suspicion sparked by the concern she had shown at the mention of her hometown. After she left the building, Sawyer walked back to his office that was being cleaned up. One of the guards that was clearing the bodies, Victor, was given a new task to complete. As Sawyer walked around the mess on the floor, he made it around to his desk and calmly issued his instructions. "Victor, I want you to get me a list of all of the people we're bringing in from New Bismarck." Victor acknowledged the order and left the room while two women were tasked to mop up the blood left on the floor. Sawyer sat at his desk and leaned back, his mind already weaving a new web of control. The list was now an important piece of information, as he suspected that someone on that list was the reason for Ella's visible fear.